investors that are very close to you geographically. And the second thing is it's very, when you look at the governance control of the company, I mean, doing an ICO is very interesting for the founders because you don't dilute your capital, you keep control of your company and of your project, so it's very, it's great.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. The fundamentals of the blockchain is the token and the way that interacts with the platform. And the idea is to educate those that you would loan for in the future, want them to be using your solution. The sooner they're able to understand what the token does, how that interacts with your solution, with the platform, with the blockchain itself, it enables a much faster adoption. And as we mentioned about globalization, what you're doing is you're almost democratizing the way that you do fundraising. You're not going through a hierarchical idea of, you know, seeing one guy and he then passes on to the next lady, or however it works. What you're doing is the whole fundamentals of what we're doing is a decentralized way. And the raising through token sale, or however you want to say it, actually mirrors that democratization, sending the information out there, and then educating people at the same time about why this is going to be why this is innovative, and actually it's going to be of value to them in the future. That token actually has value.
Yeah, great question. I think it's interesting in terms of the ICO fundraising model. I think we've been seeing kind of a push for that crowdsourcing equity. The Jobs Act passed in the US a couple of years ago, but legislation's still catching up. But I think the great thing about raising money through an ICO is that trustless, nature of it, is that anybody can invest. You don't have to sign a term sheet, things like that, and also just that it's so transparent. You invest, you get a certain number of tokens, and you have your total equity based on the number of total tokens out there. So I think in that sense, it's a very innovative way to raise money, and it makes it a lot more transparent and a lot easier to fundraise through that. Of course, there's been a lot of bad rap in the industry, unfortunately, and a lot of regulations that make it very difficult for these companies to operate. There's Malta, Gibraltar, there's a few markets, Singapore, that allow for this type of fundraising, but I think as the market matures, I think you're going to start seeing more and more fundraising, even at the higher levels, being done through ICOs. And just to touch on that as well, I think it's interesting that up until now, there's mostly been one round. So you ICO, you have one round of investment, and you build the company based on that. EOS obviously did a 1-year fundraising event, which was absolutely massive. I don't know what they're going to do with their $4 billion. I think it's too much to have at that early stage, but I think that we'll eventually start seeing, and I think we're starting to see where a company will have, a seed ICO where they'll raise, maybe 500,000 or $1 million, and then have like a round 2, which is kind of like a Series A or a Series B. So I think we're going to start seeing more of that in terms of having growth rounds versus the traditional way of some ICOs came out and raised $100 million. I don't think that's the right way to operate. I think that's too much capital early on. So I'm interested to see how that kind of evolves.
Yeah, these are some very interesting point of views.